In 2003, while stationed on an offshore research platform in the Atlantic Ocean, I recovered the body of a Bigfoot floating in open water dozens of miles from any coastline. What I discovered during the examination of that creature challenged everything I thought I understood about biology, evolution, and the natural world. This is the story I have been afraid to tell for more than 2 decades. But at my age now, I have decided that some secrets are simply too important to take to the grave. Some truths demand to be spoken, regardless of the consequences. October 12th, 2003. I was 52 years old, working as a senior marine biologist for the Atlantic Coastal Research Institute, stationed on Platform Bravo, a research and observation platform located 43 miles off the coast of Maine. The platform served as a base for studying deep-sea ecosystems, monitoring whale migrations along the eastern seaboard, tracking oceanographic currents, and collecting environmental data for federal agencies. My name is Dr. Rachel Thornton, and I had spent 28 years studying marine life. I had published papers on everything from deep water coral formations to humpback whale communication patterns, from bioluminescent organisms in the mesopelagic zone to the migration habits of Atlantic bluefin tuna. I had seen remarkable things throughout my career: giant squid specimens, rare deep-sea fish that had never been catalogued, underwater geological formations that defied conventional understanding, but absolutely nothing had prepared me for what I was about to encounter on that cold October morning. The platform housed a crew of 14 during that rotation: 7 scientists, 5 support staff, and 2 Coast Guard liaisons who were stationed with us for emergency response and coordination with maritime authorities. Platform Bravo was a substantial structure, 160 feet of steel and concrete anchored to the ocean floor, with laboratories spread across 3 levels, living quarters for the crew, extensive equipment storage, a communication center, and a helipad on the upper deck. We typically worked 3-week rotations, a demanding but rewarding rhythm I had grown to love. The platform felt like home. That October morning started like any other. I was up at 5:30, well before dawn, checking the weather station data over coffee in the main laboratory. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and through the reinforced windows I could see nothing but darkness over the water, punctuated by the distant lights of a cargo vessel. The forecast was not good. A storm system was moving in from the northeast, expected to hit our position by late afternoon. The computer models showed it intensifying, feeding off the warm ocean currents that flowed through our research area. "Rachel, are you looking at these wave height predictions?" called out Dr. Michael Huang, our oceanographer. He was a brilliant scientist, about 15 years younger than me, staring at his monitor with an expression of concern. "We're going to be dealing with 12-foot swells by 2 o'clock this afternoon, possibly 18 feet by evening if this system intensifies the way the models are suggesting. That's going to make any external operations extremely hazardous." I walked over to his screen. The satellite imagery showed a massive spiral of clouds, and the barometric pressure was dropping faster than I liked. "We should secure everything and batten down immediately," I said, making the decision my years of experience demanded. "Let's get all the external equipment stowed below deck and make sure the backup generators are fully fueled and ready. I want everyone briefed on storm protocols by noon. No unnecessary risks." Michael nodded and began sending out notifications. Within 20 minutes, the entire platform was awake and moving with purpose. Everyone understanding that storm preparation was not something to be taken lightly when you were floating 43 miles from the nearest land. By noon, the sea had begun to churn. The sky had turned a dark, oppressive gray, and the wind was gusting to 30 knots and climbing. We had brought in our floating sensors, retrieved the underwater monitoring equipment, and secured the boats to the platform with extra lines. The deck crew, led by our senior deckhand Sandra Kowalski, had been working tirelessly. At 1:30, I was in the equipment storage bay on the lower level with Sandra, double-checking the securing straps on some sensitive sonar equipment when the radio crackled to life. Platform Bravo, this is Coast Guard Station Portland. We are receiving reports of debris in the water approximately 3 miles north-northeast of your current position. Can you verify? Over. The voice was professional and clear despite the static. Lieutenant Amanda Torres, our senior Coast Guard liaison, responded from the communications room 2 levels above us. Station Portland, this is Platform Bravo. We will investigate. Visibility is deteriorating. What kind of debris are we looking for? Over. There was a pause. Unknown at this time. A fishing vessel reported seeing something large floating in the water. The crew thought it might be a whale carcass or possibly shipwreck debris. They couldn't investigate further due to the approaching weather. We would appreciate if you could take a look before the storm makes operations impossible. Over. Lieutenant Torres acknowledged. Copy that, Portland. We will take a look and report back. Over and out. I was already heading for the stairs when Sandra caught up with me, pulling on her waterproof jacket. Whatever this was, we had a narrow window. Every minute counted. 20 minutes later, Sandra and I were on the observation deck with binoculars, scanning the increasingly rough water. The wind was gusting hard, maybe 40 knots now, and spray from the waves was reaching the deck 45 feet above the waterline. There, Sandra shouted over the wind, pointing. 2 o'clock position, maybe half a mile out, something dark on the surface. I trained my binoculars and saw it. Something large and dark, rising and falling with the heavy swells. It was too big to be a seal. The shape was wrong for a whale, lacking the distinctive dorsal fin or fluke. I lowered my binoculars. Get Lieutenant Torres up here immediately, I said, and tell her we might need to deploy the rescue boat. I want Petty Officer Williams up here too. We need to make a decision fast. Within 15 minutes, a team was assembled on the lower deck near the boat launch. Lieutenant Torres, Sandra, Petty Officer David Williams, and myself. The storm was coming in faster than predicted. We had maybe an hour. The swells were already pushing 8 feet. Whatever that is out there, we need to retrieve it now or wait until after the storm passes, Lieutenant Torres said, her judgment something I trusted completely. But if it's a body, human or animal, it might not still be there after the storm. I made the decision. Let's go, but we do this fast and safe. The first sign that conditions are too dangerous, we abort immediately. No specimen is worth risking lives. Is everyone clear? Everyone nodded, and we began the launch sequence for the platform's rigid hull inflatable boat. Sandra maneuvered us away from the platform, and the boat immediately began slamming through the waves. As we got closer, fighting through spray that drenched us repeatedly, I could see the object more clearly. It was biological. I could see what appeared to be hair or fur, dark brown or black, matted and waterlogged. My first thought was a bear, maybe a black bear that had somehow ended up miles from shore. It was not unheard of, but 43 miles was beyond any reasonable possibility. Still, my mind searched for explanations that fit my understanding of the natural world. Looks like a dead bear, Lieutenant Torres called out over the engine noise. Maybe fell off a boat. Maybe, I responded, but something in my gut told me the proportions were wrong. The limbs seemed too long, the torso too humanoid. I pushed the thoughts aside as impossible, a distortion of the rough conditions. Sandra maneuvered the boat carefully, pulling up alongside the body. I got my first clear look, and my breath caught in my throat. Time seemed to stop. It was not a bear. There was no possibility that what I was looking at was any species I had ever encountered in 3 decades of research. The body was massive, floating face down. I could see arms, long and powerfully muscled, that ended in hands. Not paws, but hands with distinct fingers. The hair covering the body was thick and matted, but the structure beneath was completely wrong for any known animal. It was humanoid. It was bipedal. It was something that should not exist. "What the hell is that?" Lieutenant Torres said, her professional composure cracking for the first time I had known her. "I don't know," I replied, my scientist's brain struggling to catalogue what my rational mind rejected. "But we need to get it aboard. Immediately. Sandra, bring us closer. David, help me with the recovery gear. We cannot leave this here." Getting the body into the boat was one of the most physically demanding things I have ever done. The creature weighed at least 500 pounds, and the rolling waves made every movement treacherous. We used cargo straps and the boat's small winch, working with desperate coordination to roll the massive form over the gunwale. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we had it secured in the bottom of the boat. Now that it was aboard, I knew with absolute certainty that this was not any animal in the zoological record. The body was over 7 feet long, covered head to foot in thick, dark brown hair. The face was partly submerged in the sloshing water, but I could see a prominent brow ridge and a heavy, powerful jaw. The hands were remarkable, with 5 fingers and what appeared to be fingernails rather than claws. The feet were massive, easily 18 inches long, with a distinct heel structure. "Platform Bravo, this is rescue boat," Lieutenant Torres radioed, her voice shaky. "We have recovered the object. It is biological in nature, unknown species. We are heading back immediately. Have the medical bay prepared for examination." "Over." There was a pause. "Copy that, rescue boat. What do you mean by unknown species?" "Over." Lieutenant Torres looked at me, the same question burning in her eyes. "Unknown at this time," she finally responded. "We will brief everyone when we get back. Just have everything ready. It is large. Over and out." The return trip was rougher, the swells now pushing 10 feet. By the time we were hoisted back aboard, we were all exhausted and soaked to the bone. Michael and the other scientists were waiting on deck. When they saw what we carried on the stretcher, the looks on their faces mirrored my own: shock, disbelief, and the unmistakable spark of scientific fascination. "Rachel, what is that?" Michael asked, his voice barely audible over the wind. "I don't know yet," I replied, "but we need to get it into the examination bay immediately. And Michael, I need you to document everything. Photographs, measurements, tissue samples. I'm not certain anyone is going to believe this without extensive documentation." We moved the body into the largest storage bay, which we quickly converted into a makeshift examination area. As the storm battered the platform outside, I stood over the body and took in every detail. The hands alone were remarkable, with proportions similar to human hands, but scaled up dramatically. The palms were leathery and black. The feet were clearly designed for walking upright. The face was deeply unsettling. It was not human, not exactly, but the bone structure suggested a common ancestry that went far deeper than our relationship with known great apes. The brow ridge was heavy, the nose broad and flat. When I carefully opened the mouth, I found teeth that combined human-like molars with canines larger and more prominent than any humans. The body had been in the cold October water for perhaps 24 to 48 hours, long enough for some waterlogging, but not for significant decomposition. Over the next 6 hours, I conducted the most thorough examination I could. Michael documented everything, his hands shaking slightly, but his training keeping him focused. The creature was male, approximately 7 feet 3 inches tall. The hair was thick everywhere except the palms, the soles of the feet, and parts of the face. Some grey hairs near the temples and jaw suggested it had been mature, possibly elderly. The musculature was extraordinary, far greater than any human of similar size. This was a creature built for power. I collected tissue, blood, hair, and skin samples, carefully preserving them. The internal examination revealed a heart nearly twice the size of a human's and massive lungs, suggesting adaptations for high altitude. The digestive system suggested an omnivorous diet. The brain was perhaps the most remarkable finding. It was larger than a human brain, with a cortex showing extensive folding, similar to what we see in humans, suggesting a capacity for complex thought, planning, and perhaps even language. But the most startling discovery came when I examined the skull. On the right side of the cranium, partially hidden by hair, was an old wound, a hole in the bone, the diameter of a pencil, with edges that had healed over time. This creature had been shot. Years ago, probably decades based on the healing, something had put a bullet through its skull, and it had survived. The implications sent a chill through me. If this creature could be shot, then someone knew these things existed. This was not a freak of nature. This was a member of a species. By 3 in the morning, the storm had begun to subside. I had been working for nearly 14 hours straight, fueled by coffee and adrenaline. I began to write up my findings in the format of a scientific paper, knowing we would need extraordinary evidence to support an extraordinary claim. When the sun rose on October 13th, the storm had passed. I sent my preliminary report to the Atlantic Coastal Research Institute's headquarters in Woods Hole via secure satellite communication. I included photographs, measurements, and my initial observations, requesting a helicopter to transport the body for more detailed analysis. What I received in response was not what I expected. Within 3 hours, a message arrived from an unrecognized source coded with security protocols I had never seen. It ordered me to cease all examination immediately, secure all samples and documentation, and speak to no one. It said that specialized personnel would be arriving to take custody of the specimen and all related materials. The helicopter that arrived that afternoon was not from the Research Institute. It was a large military transport helicopter painted in unfamiliar colors. 6 people emerged, 4 in military-style uniforms with no visible insignia, and 2 in civilian clothing, who moved with an air of command. One of the civilians, a tall man in his 60s with sharp eyes, approached me. "Dr. Thornton," he said, offering a formal handshake, "I am James Whitfield. I am here on behalf of a joint federal task force. We need to have a conversation about what you found yesterday, and I need you to understand that everything you are about to learn is classified at the highest possible level. Your cooperation is not optional." That was how I learned that I was not the first person to discover what the world called Bigfoot. The United States government had known about these creatures for more than 50 years and had been operating a classified program to monitor, study, and conceal them. Whitfield, a former CIA officer, spent the next 4 hours briefing me. According to him, the government's knowledge dated back to 1947. Over the decades, a small task force had accumulated evidence of a small but persistent population of these creatures living in the remote wilderness areas of North America. They were intelligent, used simple tools, and had some form of family structure. But here was the most shocking part. The program's population estimates, based on decades of monitoring, showed fewer than 300 of these creatures left in all of North America. And that number was declining. The species was being pushed toward extinction by habitat loss, accidental killings, and deliberate killings by those who encountered them. The program's mission, Whitfield explained, was twofold. First, to study the creatures while they still existed. Second, to protect them from public discovery, which they believed would lead to a hunting frenzy that would accelerate their extinction. If the public learned Bigfoot was real, thousands would head into the forests with guns. The species would be wiped out within a decade. So the government had decided to keep their existence classified, Every sighting was investigated and either debunked or suppressed. Every piece of physical evidence was seized. Scientists who got too close were recruited or silenced. Now I was being given a choice: join the program and accept the secrecy, or face criminal charges for unauthorized possession of classified biological materials, the destruction of my career, and possibly imprisonment. It was not a choice at all. By sunset, I had signed a stack of non-disclosure agreements and watched as Whitfield's team carefully packaged the body and loaded it onto their helicopter for transport to a facility whose location I was not yet authorized to know. The next 22 years of my life would be defined by that decision. The program was headquartered in a hidden facility in rural Vermont. I was transferred there in January 2004 and found myself in a world few people knew existed. It was run by Dr. Patricia Morrison, a brilliant woman in her late 60s who had been studying these creatures since the 1970s. She would become my mentor and friend. The facility housed the largest collection of physical evidence in the world: complete skeletons, thousands of hair samples, plaster casts, and hours of video recordings showing them in their natural habitat. The DNA analysis of the body I recovered took months, but it revealed something that changed everything we thought we knew about human evolution. These creatures were not apes. They were hominids, part of the same evolutionary line that produced modern humans, but they had diverged somewhere between 1 and 2 million years ago. They were our evolutionary cousins, separated by 1 million years of independent development. The prevailing scientific understanding was that modern humans were the only surviving species of the genus Homo. Here was proof that another had survived into the modern era, living alongside us all along. The program called them Homo silvestris, man of the forest. Over the following years, I became deeply involved in the research. We studied their physiology, behavior, diet, and social organization. And we watched as their numbers continued to decline. When I joined in 2003, there were around 300. 5 years later, 240. The decline was relentless, driven by habitat loss and accidental or deliberate killings. Their reproductive rate was so low they could not replace their losses. In 2018, something happened that pushed me toward the decision I would eventually make. A team of hikers in the Olympic Peninsula captured several minutes of video footage of a family group. The footage was shaky, but undeniably real. The program moved quickly to suppress it, planting stories in the media that it was a hoax. But I had seen the original footage. I recognized the female. We called her Female 17 in our database. The transformation of genuine evidence into another Bigfoot joke broke something in me. I had spent 15 years watching these creatures die out while the world laughed. They were not being protected, they were being erased. From that point forward, I began to prepare, making copies of documents, photographs, and data, planning for the day I would break my silence. I retired from the program in 2022, by which time the population had dropped below 100. Dr. Morrison, still running the program, sensed my intentions. "Rachel," she said on my last day, "whatever you are thinking about doing, please think carefully about the consequences, not just for you, but for them." I assured her I would not be rash, but I knew my path was set. I moved to a small coastal town in North Carolina, but I could not stop thinking about them. In January 2025, I made my decision. I sat down at my computer and began to write this account. I contacted journalists, scientists, and conservation groups. Most ignored me, but a few listened, and now I am writing this, the full story, knowing exactly what the consequences will be. The federal government will come after me. I have broken my non-disclosure agreements and violated classification protocols. I will face criminal charges. I will lose my pension. but there are fewer than 80 of these creatures left. In another decade, they will be extinct. That is not acceptable to me anymore. For too long, I believed the secrecy was necessary. Now I understand my oath was protecting a secret, not a species. So I am telling the story. I am providing the evidence, the photographs, the measurements, the DNA analysis. I have enough to prove what I am saying is true. Will it trigger a hunting frenzy? Possibly. But they are being hunted anyway, killed by habitat loss and indifference. At least let them go extinct as a recognized species. Let the world know what we are losing. And maybe, just maybe, public awareness will generate the pressure needed for real protection. To the federal agents who will come, I am not hiding. I live at 1847 Soundview Lane, Cedar Point, North Carolina. I'm ready. To the scientists who will analyze this information, the DNA samples and skeletal remains are stored in classified facilities. I hope my disclosure will force access to be granted. To the conservation groups, there are specific locations where the remaining creatures live. I am including that information. They need protection now. And to the people who might read this and think of hunting them, I am begging you to reconsider. They are not monsters. They are intelligent beings with families. If you encounter one, please just let it go. I do not know if this revelation will save them or doom them, but silence was not working. At least now, whatever happens, the world will know. At least now, there will be a choice. The body I pulled from the Atlantic more than 20 years ago changed my life completely. It burdened me with a secret I can no longer keep. I spent 22 years following protocols, and in those 22 years, the species declined by more than half. It is time to try something different. I am old now and tired. I might not live to see the outcome of breaking this silence, but I am at peace with what I am doing because the alternative, carrying this secret to my grave while the last of them disappeared, was something I could not accept. Some truths are too important to die in silence. Some species deserve to be known, even if we failed to save them. The ocean gave up that body 22 years ago, a message from a world we did not know existed. Now I am finally setting that burden down and passing it to the world. What you do with this knowledge is up to you. But please remember that these are living beings. They have existed on this continent far longer than our civilization has. They deserve better than to go extinct in silence, unknown and unmourned. The decision is made now. The truth is told. Whatever comes next is out of my hands. But for the first time in 22 years, I can look at myself in the mirror without feeling like a liar. Even if it destroys me, it was worth it to finally tell the truth.